Hello and welcome to the Wednesday show. Thank you very much for being here on a Wednesday. I've got Eric Segall joining me to cover all of the consequences, the decisions that came down from the Supreme Court this week and the gun case from last week. I have a conversation with him exclusively about that in addition to our conversation from yesterday. If you want to skip to all of the Legal Eagle goings on and ongoings, that begins at 29 minutes into today's show. But I've got your headlines and a clip show today as well, and so I have plenty to get to from the last 24 hours or so. Can't do any of it and won't do any of it without you listening. And since we have started a new month, please check your credit cards and make sure you're being billed if you're a paid subscriber. And if you're not, please sign up now. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick. The summer is slow with subscriptions always, and you lose a few, so I really could use a couple of new paid subscribers signing up, joining our community, access to our Discord platform, which allows you to chat with folks 24/7. Of course, you get to join us at our Hangouts on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. I will see you tomorrow night. Looking forward to that. Hopefully the U.S. men win in the World Cup. We'll be excited about that. It'll be a fun thing to chit-chat about for those of you that like soccer. Shout out to Karen Madison and Maddie Carlson. And that is just some of what you get as part of a subscription to Stand Up with Pete Dominick. And, of course, the podcast that I do every day. How's my volume today? Is it better? People were complaining my volume was low. I thought I fixed it yesterday, but you tell me. Let's get to your headlines from yesterday. I'm going to start by covering everything that is not the Supreme Court's decisions yesterday, because that was so much of what got covered in the mainstream. But wanted to mention that in Moscow, President Vladimir Putin of Russia facing a fresh round of pressure yesterday as Ukraine launched yet another attack on the capital, continuing to disrupt Russian fuel supplies and pressing his campaign to cut off Crimea, which we never thought they were going to get back. The peninsula Moscow annexed from Ukraine in 2014. Moscow's mayor reported several waves of drones starting Monday night, less than 2 weeks after Ukraine launched the biggest drone assault on the Russian capital since the start of the war. They are really executing that war in an effective way, as far as I can tell. Iranian and U.S. negotiating teams were due in Doha this week, but Iran said on Monday no meeting had been scheduled as weekend missile fire from both sides tested the interim ceasefire to end the 4-month-old war. General Fatton is sending his son-in-law, Prince Jared Kushner, and his billionaire buddy, Steve Witkoff, to lead the negotiating team, which is like sending me and my dad. Hey, Mom, you want to come negotiate the ending of a war with me? Hey, you guys, you want to come? Anyone? Does anyone want to do it? Just anyone can go, apparently. Apparently, the deaths of 3 U.S. government firefighters in a Colorado wildfire are casting a spotlight on the Trump administration's creation of a new federal fire service and its revival of a previously discredited policy to stomp out wildfires quickly. One of the killed firefighters worked for the U.S. Wildland Fire Service, established this year without customary congressional approval by drawing personnel from 4 agencies within the Interior Department. So basically, they consolidated and created confusion, and they don't know who their bosses are, what their responsibilities are supposed to be. So it's not working. Whatever they're doing is not working, and people are dying. Critics of the administration say they're trying to fix something that's not broken. The 4 agencies the wildfires were drawn from, the Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and National Park Service, have a record of extinguishing 98% of the fires they handle. The new agency and policy won't eliminate catastrophic wildfires that occur due to dense forests, where people are increasingly moving and extreme weather is caused by climate change, according to experts I'm reading in this Associated Press news story. Everything they touch dies. All right, well, how about this? A federal judge Monday ordered the administration to permanently abandon its efforts to suspend funding for a $16 billion rail tunnel under the Hudson River, describing those attempts as flagrantly illegal. That is something that would be huge for the people of New Jersey, the people where I live in Rockland County, and so much more. And Trump is trying to withhold it or prevent it. The administration has been for a long time because they don't like New Jersey, basically. That's really the truth. And the bill known as the Kids Internet and Digital Safety, or KIDS Act, is now facing an uncertain future. Online safety legislation focused on children and teens is coming to fire from key senators passed the House on Monday. Well, it's setting the stage for continued wrangling as Congress seeks to address concerns raised by parent and free speech groups. That's an interesting story to dig into. And the latest series of payments for those who were punished for criticizing Charlie Kirk in ways Republicans didn't like. How about this one? The University of Tennessee System Board of Trustees approved a settlement with a former assistant professor named Tamir Sherinian, agreeing to pay the fired faculty member $1.9 million. Wow. She'll not be reinstated at the University of Texas, Knoxville, but state officials, including the Attorney General, need to approve the statement. I wish I had made more offensive statements after Charlie Kirk died, and then I could have got a payout. But from who? No one was going to fire me. I worked for me. Was I going to pay myself out? Yeah. Okay. Very interesting developments every time I see those happen. Well, Colorado held primaries yesterday, and guess what? Another Democratic Socialist defeated a 15-term incumbent. Milat Quiros, a 29-year-old Democratic Socialist, defeated Representative Diana DeJette on Tuesday in the Denver area. Another show of force for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, is how New York Times puts it. The triumph by Ms. Quiros unseats a 15-term incumbent and further propels the insurgent coalition that swept a series of congressional contests last week in New York. She's an immigrant, first-time candidate, was born a year after the incumbent, Diana DeJette, took office. Her victory is in a solidly Democratic district, but ensures her election in November. Same for those New York winners. She's a lawyer. She's a doctoral student in public affairs, cast herself as a political outsider capable of addressing the affordability crisis that she argued Democratic establishment has failed to resolve. Her opposition to U.S. support for Israel was also a cornerstone of her campaign and central, apparently, to her political identity. And that wasn't all in Colorado last night. No, the incumbent Senator Michael Bennet was running for governor. He lost to a progressive. The Attorney General Phil Weiser beat him by 10%, 55 to 45%. John Hickenlooper was the incumbent, and he did get he won his primary last night. He beat State Senator Julie Gonzalez, but she beat him in Denver by a big margin. And apparently the issue is that young people are coming out and voting. Early turnout showed voters 18 to 34 cast ballots that surpassed or matched older age groups. That's playing out across the country in primaries, I think it's fair to say. Oh, what else can I tell you? Dangerous heat expected in much of the country. Today is going to be, I think, the worst of it, and throughout the week it's been rough. The S&P 500 just closed out its best quarter in 6 years. How about that? A U.S. ally in the Middle East, Oman, is now proposing to collect fees from ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz despite American objections. So I guess we don't have leverage on our little ally in the Middle East anymore. What happened, Jared? Florida apparently has executed more men than all other states combined this year. 9 men have been executed in Florida. New York Times Magazine has an investigation into why. LeBron James said he's leaving the Lakers and will enter free agency. And Serena Williams made a comeback yesterday. She did not win in Wimbledon, but she's 44 years old. She returned to singles action, and she looked great. Now on to those Supreme Court headlines. Basically, you know about all of it, I'm sure, at this point, but the Supreme Court rejected the King's attempt to end birthright citizenship by executive order. Also, eliminated decades-old limits on how much political parties can spend in coordination with candidates running for office. Supreme Court ruled that police need a warrant to use cell phone location data. That's good. And the Supreme Court upheld West Virginia and Idaho laws banning transgender girls and women from girls and women's sports teams, which is bad, but probably only affects like 3 people across the country and gives some states jurisdiction as to decide what to do, is my understanding. There is more, and I'm going to talk with Eric Segall about all of it very in-depth coming up. But those are the headlines that I've gathered for you. Now it's time for segment 2, the B block, the second part of the daily show I produce for you each and every day. It's the Clip Show. Clips from yesterday. Let's start with Fox News, man on the street or woman on the street in this case. Fox, of course, headquartered in New York City. They saw a great opportunity to go out and ask New Yorkers what they thought about this movement of Democratic Socialists. And they asked, well, the wrong woman, but I'm glad she made the cut.
I love the United States. I'm a true patriot. I'm staying here. I'm sticking with it, and I'm going to fight the fascists who are currently in charge of the federal government.
Yeah, there you go. That lady on the street in New York. That aired on Fox News. I love it. All right, let's go to Princeton historian Eddie Glaude, who's got a new book I should reach out and get him on for. It's called America, USA, How Race Shadows the Nation's Anniversaries, and out ahead of the 250th anniversary, which is this week. How about it? We did it. It's a critical look back at how the U.S. celebrated previous milestone birthdays, including what narratives were left out of the official commemorations. And here he is on Morning Joe yesterday.
And Eddie, I just wonder what your thoughts are, how multidimensional they may be in terms of the gains made over the many decades versus where we are right now at America 250.
Well, thank you for having me, Mika. I think I've been struggling with what are we actually celebrating. I was thinking about the slaughter case that, in the earlier segment. And Joe has been talking about the importance of Madisonian democracy. But what we see with the slaughter case, of course, is the enshrinement of a unitary executive theory, right? That we have this outsized executive power. And so I'm worried about what that means for American democracy. I'm thinking about voting, the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, the redrawing of districts in the South. I'm thinking about the court's decision around TPS and immigration policies that harken back to the 1920s. I'm thinking about Donald Trump kind of, in so many ways blending his own kind of cult of personality with the celebration of the nation and wondering what exactly are we celebrating? Is it a storybook version of America? This idea that, we are a beacon of freedom and that our perfection was secured in our salvation? Or are we looking at the way in which our ideals don't match up to our practices, our current practices? And so I'm really going into July 4th grappling with whether or not the ugly ghosts of our country have us by the nape of the neck, Mika.
Yeah, Eddie Glaude, always great. So is Keith Boykin. I love his Instagram posts. This one's a little over 2 minutes, and it's so good about birthright citizenship and history and why it matters. They're not done. They're going to keep trying this, by the way, at least in the next 10 years, if not through congressional action. Trump demanding that Congress passes, making it illegal that if you're born here, you're a citizen, just completely reversing the plain context of the Constitution. Here's Keith Boykin.
The Supreme Court just did the right thing, but it's not a cause for celebration. In a split decision, the court blocked Donald Trump from eliminating birthright citizenship and upheld 160 years of settled law that people born in the U.S. are citizens of this country. That was the only correct decision from the beginning. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution clearly says all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. are citizens of the U.S., and no president can overturn the Constitution by executive order. The fact that this case even got to the Supreme Court shows just how far Republicans are prepared to go to take away the rights that black people fought for centuries ago. By eliminating affirmative action, DEI, and voting rights in the past few years, they tried to turn back the clock before the 1960s. And now by attacking birthright citizenship, they tried to turn it back before the 1860s. Justice Clarence Thomas, the only black man on the court, disgraced himself again by siding with racist Donald Trump. And Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the only black woman on the court, called him out by name. How can you claim the Constitution is colorblind, Justice Thomas, and then limit the 14th Amendment based on race? Jackson quoted Frederick Douglass in her concurring opinion, "The glorious birthright of our common humanity will become the inheritance of all the inhabitants of this highly favored country." 173 years ago, Frederick Douglass stood right here in New York State and issued an ultimatum from black people to white America. We declare that we are, and of right, we ought to be American citizens. That was 1853. But 4 years later, the Supreme Court denied our citizenship in the infamous Dred Scott case, claiming that black people were inferior beings and had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. Yes, the laws may have changed a lot since then, but the racist attitudes remain. Don't be fooled that this is just about the children of immigrants. If they can take away the 14th Amendment from them, they can take it away from black people. The fact that we are even having this discussion in the same week America celebrates its 250th birthday exposes the hypocrisy at the core of the broken promise of the Declaration of Independence. After 250 years, a revolutionary war, and a bloody civil war, much of white America still refuses to abandon the centuries-old delusion of white supremacy.
Yes, indeed, Keith Boykin. Well done. And now here's more from Jamar Tisby, who picks up and talks about the temporary protection status. Jamar is a historian. He's an author and a professor. He writes about white Christian nationalism. Great guy and very smart. He's been on the show before. Got to get him back. Here he is.
This week, the Supreme Court handed down a decision canceling temporary protected status, which affects more than 300,000 Haitian people and several thousand Syrian people. But what many folks don't realize is that one of the justices who voted in favor of canceling this policy is Amy Coney Barrett. Now, she has 7 children. 2 of them are adopted from Haiti. So the question is, how could a mother look at her children from a country racked by poverty and hardship, much of which was caused by colonialism and imperialism, and not have compassion for the country they came from or for the people who are part of their broader community? How can she cast a vote that sends other Haitians back into danger? This is a reminder that proximity does not always lead to empathy. For example, white Southerners shared the same towns, the same streets, sometimes even the same homes with black people. And it still didn't move most of them to support civil rights or desegregation. Closeness and cruelty can live right next to each other. This is about more than one Supreme Court justice or her family. It's about whether we truly see the humanity in one another, whether in an island in an ocean or right next door. Follow at Jamar Tisby for more.
Yeah, definitely follow him and subscribe on Substack. Good stuff. Here's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the steps of the Capitol. She was also asked about this TPS decision from the Supreme Court.
When it comes to the Supreme Court ending TPS for Syrians and Haitians, just talk about the fact that some of these people are being sent to their deaths.
I mean, it's horrifying. We know this for a fact that TPS is granted in some of the most extreme cases where people are under the most humanitarian threat. And the reason that people go through a very rigorous process in applying for TPS, and just to be approved for TPS and to have that status in the first place is confirmation that it is too dangerous for you to go home. And so to sentence so many people to extremely life-threatening conditions for no reason, because these folks are such gifts to American society. These communities are tremendous assets. In New York City alone, I can tell you how much of an enormous asset that the Syrian community has been, that the Haitian community has been. They are vibrant. They contribute so much to our genius, to our culture, to our economy, to our communities. And it's a loss for the United States. It's a loss for us. My hope is that we will be able to do everything we can in these very difficult circumstances.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman.
There you go. AOC with her thoughts on it. Articulate and excellent as always. Here's Dahlia Lithwick, one of the smartest con law scholars out there, one of my favorite authors, the hilarious and brilliant. She was on with Jessica Yellen on her Instagram account.
This is the court disempowering Congress and empowering, in effect, creating an imperial presidency and doing that by way of being an imperial court. So what's really deeply frightening about this is, in some sense, it sounds in the key of that presidential immunity decision, where the court essentially says, the president's power is to the maximalist outer bounds of what we could contemplate presidential power being. It has ever been thus. And in so doing, disempowers Congress in ways that Congress can't recover from.
All right, Dahlia Lithwick. Excellent as always. And the Michigan primary is not until August 4th. And one of the most watched contests is that one there between those running for the nomination for Senate in Michigan. And it is between Mallory McMorrow and Abdul El Sayed, who is an epidemiologist and public health official. And man, this guy is really good. I know Mallory and I've interviewed her a couple times. She's very effective, very smart. I think would do a great job. But Abdul El Sayed is so good on the campaign trail. Very charismatic, very good looking guy and whatever. Here he is. I thought this was pretty effective stump speech
It's funny, they've taken to calling me dangerous. Now, I wonder why you would call somebody from my background with my faith dangerous. You heard that before? No. And it's interesting. You ask the folks living in these communities, the grandma whose grandchild finally got a pair of glasses, if I'm dangerous. Ask the folks living in Southwest who finally saw somebody stand up to the polluters in their neighborhood if I'm dangerous. Ask the parents whose kids were in Detroit public schools when we made sure that there wasn't lead in those schools if I'm dangerous. Ask the folks who got Narcan that saved their lives whether or not I'm dangerous. Ask the folks who got a medical debt relief check if I'm dangerous. I'm not dangerous if you need government to work for you. But I tell you what, I sure am dangerous if you're one of those folks who's a corporation or a special interest or a politician who does their bidding, who's stopping government from working for you. So yeah, if you're Chuck Schumer, I'm dangerous. If you're AIPAC, I'm dangerous. If you're a corporate PAC, I'm dangerous. If you're Blue Cross Blue Shield CEO, I'm pretty damn dangerous. If you're a DTE, I for sure am dangerous. But if you're somebody who needs government to work for you, I aim to be the best friend you ever had.
Yeah, there he is. Abdul El Sayed. Good stuff, I think. Now I got a 5-minute clip between Congressman Mark Pocan and the OMB chief, who is a Christian nationalist himself, Ross Vogt. Yesterday, he was at an oversight hearing, and Mark Pocan really took it to him on the cuts to USAID and the deaths that they've caused, even taken to reading the names of victims. I thought this was a great back and forth and grilling. I mean, I've seen better, but Pocan does a pretty good job here. And so I included the whole 5 minutes because I thought you might like it. And somebody needs to be held responsible for what is being measured as millions that are dying as a result of these cuts.
You know, many of us disagree with the first time in 250 years history of the country, the unified executive theory. So let me drill into one area to ask. Do you concur that multiple studies have shown that people, both adults and children across the globe, have died because of cuts to programs like USAID?
I do not concur with the validity of those studies. They are based on
Do you agree that people have died across the globe because of our cuts?
I believe these studies that people are banting about.
My question is, do you believe people have died because of the cuts to USAID? It's simple, yes or no.
I do not believe that the administration.
You don't believe anyone's died.
Let me finish the question.
No, it's a yes or no.
It is.
Doctor, it's really simple. Do you think people died or not?
Cuts are aimed at.
All right, you're not going to answer it. I would claim my time. I thought you were going to be a little more helpful, Director Vogt, but that's fine. So this is Boston studies, Lancet studies. Others have said hundreds of thousands to millions of kids and adults will die because of this. One of your co-conspirators, Elon Musk, recently has been going nuts trying to claim no one's died, and he has to name names. So let me mention a few people who've died because of these cuts. Rovina Naboy in Kenya, her little daughter Jane died of starvation in a refugee camp because we cut back on their food and the food rations. She got sick and died. Ugana Balama, Nigeria, USAID-funded program, Babies a Special Nutrient-Dense Paste to avoid malnutrition. She had twins, 6 months old. The program ended abruptly because of cuts to USAID. 2 weeks later, one of the twins died. I've got a bunch more. Are you familiar with any of these stories?
13.4 million for civic engagement.
Are you familiar with any of these stories? There's no number involved in that answer, Director Vogt.
You're citing.
Are you familiar with any of these stories? I just gave you 2 examples. Are you familiar? It's a yes or no.
I am familiar.
Don't dance. You're not a tap dancer. Are you familiar with the stories? It's really that simple.
I am familiar with the press that you are citing. The reports that you are also referring to are
I take my time back. You're clearly not going to answer questions today. I thought you came to answer questions. You're not. So will you commit to reach out if I submit some of these names of people who have allegedly died due to cuts? Will you personally reach out to find out if they have, since you're saying no one's died?
I will personally read all correspondence that Congress gives me and do everything I can to be responsive to them.
Yeah, and could you reach out to them to actually verify whether or not someone's died? because of a cut to USAID?
We're monitoring all of these studies to see if there's validity, but there is nothing about those studies that has caused us to think differently about ending
morally,
$4.6 million to build climate resilience in Honduras.
Take my time back, please. Morally, isn't it wrong to facilitate the death of children?
Isn't it morally wrong to
That's a question coming back with
Zimbabwe?
Look, you're not Confucius or whatever you think you are, answering a question with a question. I said, is it morally wrong to facilitate the killing of children?
You're basing
question.
You're basing it on a premise that is false. I'm not going to answer that question.
Take my time back. You wrote in a 2021 article in Newsweek about Christian nationalism that our rights and duties are understood to come from God. Isaiah 58:7 commands, quote, share your food with the hungry and provide the poor wanderer with shelter. Are you saying God was misquoted or wrong?
I'm sorry. What does it have to do with the question with regard to our administration?
It's morally wrong to facilitate the death of children. I think
we're not doing
we're
not doing that.
That's why I'm asking you to reach out to folks. But what I'm saying is, if that is a quote from the Bible, and I know you are a Christian nationalist by declaration, by articles.
Second year in a row that you've used that slander for
it's not slander. You think that's slander?
Other Christians.
Do you think calling someone a Christian nationalist is a slander? You wrote an article. Is there anything actually wrong with Christian nationalism? And now you're saying it's a slander? That's really odd.
I don't pejorative, and it's the second year you've done it.
Would you agree that it is wrong, morally, ethically, or by your own admission, biblical standards? Is it wrong to facilitate the death of children?
We're not doing that. We have adequate foreign aid for this.
You're not answering the question. Listen to the question, please. Is it morally, ethically, or biblically wrong to facilitate the death of children? Don't take anything else in context. Is it wrong?
This administration is not doing that.
You cannot answer a question. I mean,
I believe he answered the question. You just don't like the answer. So
no, he hasn't. No, Mr. Chairman, you can ask your own questions and get your own answers, but if he's not going to give an answer,
then move on.
Everyone else can figure out. No, I don't have to move on. I can ask the question, and if this guy is going to, say Christian nationalism is an insult, you might have some friends to answer to that one for. But to say the sort of stuff and not answer questions directly, it is morally, ethically, and biblically wrong to facilitate the death of children.
All right, there you go. Well, I thought that was pretty good, and I would like to see better and more grilling. Like to see Elon Musk and all of the rest of them who are responsible for that be held responsible. I wouldn't hold your breath. Now let's listen to the former U.S. attorney for the District of Maryland, and more importantly, he was a member of the Trump administration's legal team in Trump 1. He says he never voted for Trump. I guess he didn't like Donald Trump. He's an old man now, so he sounds a little old when he talks about people of color and trans people, but I feel like he's an old man doing his best at this point. Here he is talking to Jim Acosta on his Substack channel yesterday.
Continuing to has drained the presidency of dignity, and he is continuing to divide the country. The hatred that he demonstrates for immigrants, even for Democrats, for Americans, is shocking. And we need a uniter. We need somebody who can bring dignity back to the White House, can unite the country and remind us that we're all part of, a large country that is, we have trans people that are, highly valued and intelligent, and people love them. We have people of color, highly valued, that, deserve their rights, their dignity, the ability to vote, to be represented in Congress. We have immigrants from almost every country in the world, who need to be assimilated into the United States, and to act lawfully. We don't need, the unlawful immigrants, the people that have been convicted of murders and rapes abroad, or they commit murders and rapes here and they should be deported. But that's a tiny, tiny percentage of the people that they're rounding up and treating like animals. This is not American, and we should all be ashamed of this man. We should all be embarrassed by this man, and we should all be doing everything we can, to ensure that he leaves the White House as quickly as possible.
All right. That's it. That's the clip show. Yes, indeed. The comedians are off. Send me your comedy clips so I can include them. But right now it's time to get to my featured guest. He's one of your all-time favorites. He is a con law professor at Georgia State University, the author of 2 books. He hosts of a great podcast called Supreme Myths, which is also the name of his first book. Originalism as Faith is the second one. You know him, you'll love him. And we covered yesterday's results at the Supreme Court. And at the end of last week, we talked about the gun case that the Supreme Court decided. And I tagged that conversation on to this one. So that starts, I think, in like 45 minutes after this. But here we are yesterday. It's me and the Legal Eagle, Eric Segall. It's time for the Legal Eagle, Eric Segall, Georgia State constitutional law professor, and now the chair of very, very prestigious, what's it called, institution now?
The Bondurant Center for Constitutional Law, Practice, and Democracy. I am the executive director.
Pretty big deal, and so it's always a big deal when we get to talk to you. And look at you. He's in a new space. I'm in a new space, and it's a new day, ladies and gentlemen. It's a new day at the Supreme Court. And before we get into today's decisions, much less anything with yesterday's, we talked last week about the gun case, which I'm adding to today's podcast. That will be coming up because we talked exclusively about that. But first and foremost, a huge comeback today of sorts has nothing to do with the court. I know you wanted to mention this.
Yeah, so really the biggest news of today, that's not really true, but the most interesting news of today, because all 3 cases that came out today, we expected to come out the way they did. Serena Williams, 1 o'clock, playing singles. This is huge. This is big. And she's 44, I think. There's no precedent for this. We'll see what happens.
And you're a huge tennis player and fan, and so Wimbledon's a big tournament, and Serena Williams making a huge comeback that's getting buried by all kinds of obvious news, the World Cup and more. I had no idea that she was coming back, but everybody knows.
By the way, on the World Cup, I am not a soccer fan, but last night I did watch the final game, which went to penalty kicks. It was unbelievably exciting. This is so much more fun than talking about the court. Do we really have to talk about the court?
Yeah, we have to talk about the court. Of course, that's why you're here. I interview experts about their expertise. That's generally what I do. And none of these things are yours. You're a big tennis fan. You certainly don't like soccer, obviously. And of course, a penalty shootout is always exciting. If it was the whole game were that way, it would be that much more exciting to people who don't understand how beautiful the beautiful game is, you included. But so, all right. I got to ask you also about Samuel Alito. There's reports that he was retiring. NPR put that out and then they retracted it. But apparently I'm hearing they only retracted it because it was embargoed and they weren't supposed to let it out. But they knew that it was the case. And I hear that you have an insider as well telling you.
No, I have no inside information.
You have inside information.
I predicted yesterday that he would retire. I think it's extraordinarily likely that he's about to retire. I think what happened was NPR had the story and then did it too soon. But we'll find out. I could be wrong. But I want to talk about the word you used, Pete. It's an important word, embargo. Because Americans don't understand that this happens, this embargoing of news, more often than people think. And it's famously, there have been some moments in history where the president has asked, back in the day when there were 3 networks, not to report on certain war efforts. Right. And that's, we can all agree if men and women's lives are at stake, that's a reasonable thing to ask. What people may not know is every year, the Chief Justice of the United States on December 31st issues his year-end report on the federal judiciary and the Supreme Court. And they do this on December 31st, and it comes out at 6 p.m. on New Year's Eve, which means no one in the world gives one little tiny fuck about it. But what's interesting about it is the New York Times, the Washington Post, Fox, CNN, a select number of media outlets get that report hours earlier because they don't want to make them work on New Year's Eve, reading it at 6.
Sure.
And it's embargoed. They're asked not to publish it for half a day or something. Now that's weird because there's nothing secretive about it. There's nothing national security about it. It's just the Chief Justice being a prima donna. And I think so in this case, for example, it would not surprise me if the Supreme Court Information Office gave a few news outlets the story that Alito was going to retire, but don't announce it to 2 o'clock or 5 o'clock. Justice Kennedy's retirement was announced, I believe, at 2 o'clock after the last day of the term, not right away. But this whole idea of embargoing, which NPR goes along with, I find upsetting in a free speech America. But anyway,
I understand that, and I don't know that I care too much. We're going to find out when we find out. And I also do.
People have been saying, Pete, to me, I said it was good that he's retiring. Well, other people are saying it's going to be worse. I said it can't be worse.
Yeah, can you just explain the situation in terms of what this will mean for the makeup of the court and how, if anything, Democrats can prevent Trump from appointing, I would imagine he's going to appoint a bag of coal or an AR-15 or Aileen Cannon. Really? Yeah.
Florida, who does all his business.
Todd Blanche. But either way, the most important question is, what does this mean?
So, to be clear, Justice Alito has voted against the interests of liberals and Democrats and for the Republican Party and conservatives in every single case, like in forever, like in a very long time. He's not a swing justice. He did side with the liberals on one case recently, but it wasn't. But in every issue you and I have talked about, he votes the wrong way. So as far as voting, it's just trading one nut for another nut. Now, the response I get from the internet on that is, yeah, but this nut will be 40 years old or 45 years old and be there forever. Alito is 7, whatever Alito is. So that makes it worse because you get the same vote, but for a longer period of time, which is a fair critique of what I'm saying, except for one thing. Pete, we must reform the court.
Well, yeah.
We just because we're stuck with these people for a very long time. And even if we weren't, I want to reiterate what I've said on your show since 2008. Even when the court does really good things for the left, that eventually causes more problems for the left in the political arena. So the left loses either way. The left loses if the court is good for the left. The court loses if the court is bad for the left. That's been the story. That we only have Donald Trump because of the war in court. Without Roe versus Wade and other liberal decisions, Donald Trump would not have been elected in 2016. The Supreme Court was the most important issue to 23% or so of Trump voters. So what we need to do is recognize that the court is terrible. It has been terrible forever. We need to reform the court. It may have to be like an addict. It might have to get – so today 4 justices voted to rewrite clear text in the Constitution, which says if you're born in America, you're an American citizen. It wasn't 9-0. It was technically 6-3 because Kavanaugh said congressional statute binds this case, and that's what the statute means. But on the constitutional question, there were 4 votes that the 14th Amendment doesn't mean what it says. That's 1 vote away, Pete. That's insane for an issue that is incredibly easy. So the worse the court gets, I actually think the better it is for our country for the next couple of years. Because when Democrats come back to power, if they do, even if they control all 3 branches of government, unless they reform the court, we're stuck.
It's going to have to be a major part of the presidential campaign. I'm guessing we're going to hear a lot about that for whoever runs in 28. But what does this mean right now? If, in fact, he does retire, it's announced today there will be a vacancy on the court, and it's just months before a midterm election.
Yeah, they will nominate somebody quickly and make sure it goes through before.
Will it go through? Do they have the senators, the number of senators they need? Is there anything that the Democrats can do to stop it?
No, not if 50 senators plus the vice president vote for it. Now, could Susan Collins, could a couple of the moderate Republicans? They've never done it, so I don't think they will. Susan Collins has been asked if she, regrets her vote for Kavanaugh, for example. And she said, I'm sad Roe versus Wade was overturned, but I don't regret the vote.
Yeah, I saw that recently. She said that, I think.
Yeah. Will this Senate – I mean, if he appoints non-lawyer nutcase, if he appointed – or even if he appointed like, I don't know, Judge Judy or somebody, would the Senate would the Senate stand up? I have no idea. Probably not. I don't know. But – they will rush it through, Pete, before January 1st. There's no question.
All right. So the decision, as you predicted, with I think 80% sureness was that they left birthright citizenship intact, and this is a big...
They did more than that. The five of them did more than that. They said this is a constitutional rule Congress cannot change. It is the text of it is crystal clear. That's 5 votes for that. And it's the right decision. It's not close. The fact what everybody on the internet is saying, who I follow, is that the fact that there were 4 votes is kind of a surprise.
Yeah, I saw this from Gregory Hayes. 4 out of 9 Supreme Court justices find the Constitution unconstitutional. What a time to be alive.
What's interesting about this, Jamal Green is a law professor at Columbia, very good, very strong. And he made this
very strong.
He made this point. The history of constitutional law in this country is minority views that are considered off the wall, like segregated schools are unconstitutional, which was in 1890, 8 of 9 Supreme Court justices said separate but equal was constitutional. Minority views become majority views after decades and decades of social movements, political pressure, politicians, and eventually an off-the-wall argument becomes on the wall. And that is the story of American constitutionalism. That's a fair descriptive account. What he said today, and I agree with, is the fact that the 14th Amendment doesn't mean exactly what it says it means was taken off the wall and put on the wall very, very quickly by a few law professors who were doing it for ambitious reasons, who aren't honest in their scholarship, who wanted to be cited by Justice Thomas today and were cited by Justice Thomas. That's what they wanted. Never had – I mean, the broccoli argument was like this, but that took 3 years. And it took 3 years for the actually, I take that back. It took 4 years for the broccoli argument.
The argument about the individual mandate for healthcare, but the point is, it takes a long time to get in the public's minds and repetitive message,
but not anymore.
In the law experts' minds.
The reason not anymore is because we have law professors who are ambitious, who want nothing more than publicity, know how to use the internet. And if, the professor of law at blankety blank school says, well, the birthright citizenship thing is harder than people think, then media pundits can say, look, there's a law professor who thinks that. What's gotten lost in all of this, and frankly, Pete, I've written about this 3 or 4 times on Dorf on Law because of you. You're the cause of why I've written about this.
Oh, dear.
You specifically, because you are the one who got me into the media situation that I was in for a long time and still am in to some degree. And I have to say that my role as a media person, whether it be CNN or your show or an NPR, or I'm talking to, various local things today, it's not the same role as a law professor. It's different roles. And we haven't quite figured out that symbiosis, because I'm not really talking academically today to you. If I was giving a lecture to other law professors about these cases, I would do it differently than I'm giving it to your audience. And so this law professor who's crazy at Minnesota, along with Randy Barnett, who you and I have talked about a lot, who's also crazy, those two write an op-ed in the New York Times very early saying the birthright citizenship issue is harder than people think.
That's how it started.
That op-ed was terrible. It was frivolous and terrible. But that starts the ball rolling, and within 3 months, it's now an on-the-wall argument. That's a very dangerous place to be. That's a very dangerous place.
Also want to mention this case today that the court decided to lift spending limits on political parties and candidates.
This is the most important case of the term.
This is another strike to campaign finance and a major blow to democracy, it's fair to say. It weakens us. These indexes, these organizations that measure the health of democracy will take a look at this case and its decision and what it means for campaign finance and add another strike is my guess. But what do we need to know?
Another 6-3 case, of course, with the conservatives and liberals divided on partisan lines. So it is still the case today, although it may not be the case 3 years from now. But today there is a limit on how much money we can donate to a candidate. I cannot give $1 million to the candidate of my choice. That was a law passed after Watergate, and the Supreme Court upheld contribution limits in Buckley versus Vallejo in the 1970s. And it's still the law, although it's going to be challenged soon. And the obvious rationale for this law, Pete, is if a billionaire or anyone gives a lot of money to a candidate and says, here's some money, by the way, I want you to vote, X on Y, that's quid pro quo corruption. There is a compelling interest in stopping quid pro quo corruption, even according to this Supreme Court. And so you can't just give as much money as you want to a political candidate. Because of that rule, that same law, and then other laws that came later, realized that if I could give unlimited money to a political party, and that political party can work in coordination with a candidate, then I can just circumvent the donation rule by giving $500,000 to the Republican Party, which they then spend on the candidate of my choice in any way they want, right, including paying the candidate's bills in a coordinated manner. So it's been the law since the mid-'70s or something like that, that you can't do that. That political parties don't have the right to spend – they have the right to spend unlimited money independently of a candidate, but they don't have the right to coordinate that spending with the candidate until today. And now they do. And this overturns, by the way, a previous Supreme Court case that had exact same law, exact same case, and said that was constitutional. Supreme Court says we're not going to follow precedent today, and we expressly overrule that case. And what it basically means is the donation limits are now much, 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 much weaker than they were before. And all that does is funnel money. Now, let me be clear about one thing, Pete. There are people out there who are experts in the politics of money, which I am not yet. I'm on the road to being, but not yet. I know a lot about it. But there are experts out there who suggest there are some reasons why, given the other Supreme Court cases here, this ruling might have effects that aren't terrible. But that's not the point I want to make to you. Really? Yeah. I don't know how strong a view that is. There are smart people saying that. But that's not the point. What everybody who is sensible agrees on this is that's not the court's decision to make. This is and by the way, in Justice Kavanaugh's majority opinion for the court, in this case, there is not one syllable about the original meaning of the First Amendment.
Right. You use the original arguments when they want and not when they don't, and constantly contradicting
everything we know about campaign finance reform is much worse than Roe versus Wade or any of those Warren Court decisions about living constitutionalism. Just one quick point about that. In Citizens United itself, Justice Stevens made the point that this is a case about the regulation of corporations. Corporations did not have free speech rights in 1789. Corporations only had the rights that states gave them. That's it, period, full stop. And the majority, he said, makes no attempt to get past that originalist idea. Scalia did respond to that in Citizens United in a concurring opinion, but his response gives the game away as well as any response ever has. Scalia said, Justice Stevens may be right. The law in 1790 was such that corporations likely didn't have the right to spend money on political campaigns. And then he says, but the role of, this is Scalia talking, the role of corporations in our country has changed so much that their rights have changed as well. And that's fair. That's not, I'm not arguing with the mode of analysis there, but that's the opposite of originalism. It's just the opposite of it. The role, we know what they meant then, but society has changed, so now it means something different. Well, that's what Justice Brennan would say, or Justice Jackson, or Justice Kagan. Main point I want to make, this campaign finance reform case today, the last in a long list of Roberts Court's opinions, are anti-originalist, anti-historical, living constitutionalism based on the value that we should have a free market for our political system. And I had a colleague who wrote a book a few years ago saying a free market economy is the best way to run an economy. Of course, there have to be regulations and safety things, but I've not yet encountered a system that's better than free markets, roughly speaking. But that should not be applied to our politics. Our political system is not an economic system, and a free market political system just enables those in power and those who are rich to dominate even more than they already do. And he's 100% right about that. But the Roberts Court believes that politics has to be like the economy, totally unregulated. It's crazy.
Let's talk about the decision, though, about the FTC, or specifically, this is, I guess, yesterday, that giving more power to the unitary executive idea, which is a lot of what these MAGA folks like. I think Steve Bannon and plenty of others. And now he can fire basically the heads of any agency. This standard's been there for over 90 years that you can only do that for cause, which begs why didn't anybody necessarily do it? But obviously, this is something that the president was not supposed to be able to do. You can hire him, but you can't really fire him. And now he's going to be able to fire anybody he wants at these, quote, independent
You can't hire
agencies.
them either. They have to be approved by Congress.
He's now going to be able to fire anybody at these independent agencies, which were independent for a reason. And I'm sure there'll be lots of chatter and great conversation with the experts about what these agencies do, why their independence matters so much. And now he's going to have like a box of cigarettes regulating the cigarette industry, the tobacco industry, and so on and so forth. It's going to be, what does this mean?
Well, first of all, it's much worse than that.
Oh.
It's a good description, but it's much worse than that.
Actual cancer will be in charge.
I used to say on Twitter, Blue Sky, to you, social media, I've said on CNN, that the court doesn't care about what happened yesterday. And that's why it's not a court, because courts are supposed to care about what happened yesterday. They don't. But I have to change that now. Now the court doesn't care what they said 10 minutes ago, which is really weird. So yesterday, the first decision says the president cannot fire the agency heads at the Federal Reserve. He cannot do that. He can only do that for cause. That's the first case. The reason the court gives is the Federal Reserve today is the great-great-great-great-great-grandson of the first national bank of the United States in 1789, and the first national bank was structured in a way that's not too dissimilar from this, and therefore, as a matter of history, we can't strike it down. Now, the real reason they go on to say is because if we made the members of the Fed amenable to political firing by the president at his will, our economy would tank, and it's possible the world's economy would tank. So that's a prudential, political thing. So that's like at 10 o'clock or 10:10. 10 minutes later, the court issues an opinion saying the president has to have the unilateral power to fire the heads of all agencies in the United States. No exceptions. It's a huge thing. We're reversing a landmark case from 70 years ago. The unitary executive has to work this way. And they spend one paragraph saying, of course, the Federal Reserve is different. The Federal Reserve is not different, Pete. The Federal Trade Commission is an incredibly important independent agency that protects consumers. If it is subject to the whim of the president at will, that he can fire anybody anytime, then you are correct. The people on the FTC will end up being corporate lackeys who just do what the president said, so on and so forth.
And every other agency.
To distinguish one agency from all the rest. And by the way, in 1791 or 95, it wasn't just the first national bank. There were a number of different agencies, one of them sometimes to collect taxes, that were somewhat independent of the president. So what this is what I predicted on November 14th, 2016, when I wrote a piece saying that Trump cares about abortion only because he wants to get reelected. He doesn't care about same-sex marriage at all. He cares about one thing, deregulation. And the justices he put on the bench, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, all care deeply about deregulation.
Yeah.
And that's what this is about. And because they want companies to make as much money as possible, and they don't care about things like products causing cancer and things like that, seatbelts, airbags, whatever. This is a purely policy decision about our economy, which, by the way, I think they're wrong, but okay, we can have a real discussion about free market economics versus regulation. But it's, again, not the Supreme Court's job. They made the carve out for the Fed because they want to protect their own pocketbooks and the pocketbooks of America.
Yeah, right.
It's insane, Pete. It's absolutely. Now, the Fed should be independent. But so should the FTC.
It's interesting what you said about, Donald Trump. You wrote that piece back in 2016, his motivation being, when it comes to the courts, to deregulate, because the guy hates rules. But, a lot of people hate rules, and there are two kinds of people, those who don't like rules but follow them, and those who don't like rules and don't follow them, or think that rules are for other people. Not for me. And there's a lot of people who think that way, and regardless of their political ideology.
But if we take as a premise that the Supreme Court is supposed to look at a problem by looking at constitutional text, constitutional history, the traditions of America, and its own prior cases, on all four of those grounds, the case saying that the president must have power to fire everybody except the Federal Reserve is as wrong can be. And numerous law professors have written extensive articles, 100-page articles, talking about how the major questions doctrine, which is also supposed to limit, regulations, all of this stuff is not supported by text or history. Congress has the power to make all rules necessary and proper to carrying out the proper functions of the government, not the Congress.
Is this a conservative or originalist view that the executive branch should have all the power or much more power? Is that a liberal or conservative view that each branch should be a check on the other? I mean, I never really. Because it just seems that a lot of conservative-minded Americans and pundits and so on used to be screaming against, a king and be promoting democracy in Congress, passing laws and so on. But now that the Supreme Court is so powerful, they've basically created this king, and because it's their guy, they seem to like it. Is that basically? Is there any? So
sometimes people get confused about what separation of powers and checks and balances mean. It does not mean, and has never meant, total separation of powers. And it has never meant, and it's not supposed to mean, the accumulation of all powers in one. James Madison wrote, the accumulation of all powers, judicial, legislative, and executive, in one person, whether elected, hereditary, whatever, is the very definition of tyranny. But the president and the Congress have to work together to pass laws, to execute the laws, et cetera. So what we have is a system of separated and shared powers. And what this court has done, what the Roberts Court has done, is it's taken the idea of shared powers and said, no, the president has basically all of them. Or if they haven't said that, they have put hurdles in Congress's way to make it very difficult for Congress to limit the president. So we do have a system now where the president has so much more power than the founding fathers ever thought. I don't care about that. What I care about is we have a president now who's much too powerful I don't care if it's the Democrat, Republican, progressive, not. There's too much power in the presidency, and that is the Roberts Court's fault, pure and simple. And one last thing about that, and I've mentioned this before to you, but it's super important. I went to a separation of powers conference 6 months ago, and on the panel was someone, unlike me, incredibly well-versed in technology and AI. And his presentation was AI is going to make the president 1,000 times stronger than the presidency has ever been before. And I called him out on it. I was like, can you give us more facts about that, please? In the past, he said, presidents can really have 4 or 5 major agenda items, right? With Obama, it was healthcare. With Nixon, it was law and order. I think with President Bush, it was kind of Iraq and all that, and then a couple other things. But they can't focus on 27 different big issues at a time. With AI, that's changed because now you can get all the information you need in 3 or 4 paragraphs very quickly. And if you think about Congress, when 600 people have access to the same information and they fight about it, that's one thing. But here we have one person who has now more power than he's ever had in the history of America with the greatest technology any president has ever had, not to mention nuclear weapons. So this is terrible. It's terrible.
It is terrible, but I keep thinking that what if all of this executive branch power, this unitary executive theory, went to a really great, enlightened, progressive president, how would she use that power? I mean,
well, without reforming this Supreme Court, they wouldn't be able to. That's one thing. But leaving that aside,
why wouldn't they be able to?
Because this court is going to strike down liberal progressive policies for the rest of its existence.
Oh, so meaning every single policy that...
Not everyone, but...
Well, right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay.
But wait. The real answer to your question, though, is... I really like Pete Buttigieg. I like that guy. I think that guy is smart. I'm starting to like Ossoff in Georgia. Never did before, but now I do.
Well, why did you not like him? Everybody loved him.
Doesn't matter.
Okay,
I think he's great. Okay. Let's leave it at that.
All right. Calm down.
I don't want any human being having this power.
Well, no.
I don't want you and me having this power.
Sure. Well, I certainly don't want me having it. But no, obviously agree with that. That's too much power in the hands of one person. No doubt about it. That person can be cajoled. That person could be blackmailed. That person could be. This is a terrible way to run a government, much less any other organization, in my opinion. That's why they have boards and so on. But okay, I got to ask you this before we go. This has happened during our conversation.
Wait. Trans cases? Not going to talk about it?
Oh, the court decided today that states can decide.
States can prohibit trans women from playing on men's sports teams under both. They have to prohibit it, I believe, under the federal statute, but under the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, they have the right to do that. I just want to say a couple words about it because it's getting a lot of publicity.
Sure.
You and I have talked about this before. I think this is an enormously complex, difficult issue. It doesn't affect that many people.
The trans sports specifically. We're not talking about trans discrimination in general
No, just sports.
Yeah.
And I don't like the way the court handled it. They could have done a much more narrower decision, waited for more science to come in. They should have done that. But I think it's a very nuanced, fact-specific thing. I have no strong feelings about the result, but I do have strong feelings about Justice Clarence Thomas, who did not write the majority opinion. He joined the majority opinion in full, so he did not have to write anything but he did. And his entire opinion denigrates and suggests that this issue comes down to states have a right to stop boys from playing on girls' teams. But that's not the question in this case, Pete. That's not looking at it that way. And the whole tone of the opinion is MAGA to the bone. And the point I want to make about that, and I'm going to make it publicly, and it's the first time I think I've made it this strongly. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I've never been in the same room as Clarence Thomas. I think he is in his 70s losing it. And I think he is getting he's getting more open, he's getting more honest with his true opinions, and it's turning out that we all knew this, that his opinions are sounding much more dickish than they ever have. And I raise this because it wouldn't surprise me if a few years from now, his mental state, as some people in their 70s do, denigrates to the point where he can't do his job, as has happened to numerous Supreme Court justices over the years. And there's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
And that's insane.
That's the point. Your point is that he's degrading to the point where he may not be able to do his job. And there's
filter is gone. He had a filter. It's gone.
Nothing we can do about it.
Nothing. And so Justice Douglas in the 1970s had a stroke, left him incapacitated. He could not work on opinions. He did not resign. He refused to resign for 8 months. And during that 8-month period, the court didn't decide any cases where his vote would have mattered. And he eventually was pressured by his family and did resign. But had he not resigned, he couldn't be. You can't be impeached. You can't be impeached for incompetence, or a terrible disease. You can only be impeached for a high crime and misdemeanor. So this is one more time when life tenures. I think Justice Thomas is on his way to crazy land, and we'll see.
On his way.
We'll see.
So the Supreme Court announced today it'll consider next term whether the Second Amendment protects the right to own an AR-15 or other semi-automatic rifle.
I didn't see that. When did that come out? That just came out
while we were talking.
Okay.
Daniel Grand v. University Heights. No, that's
so Pete, people who have listened to me on your show for a while know how riled up I can get, especially on the last day of the term, especially on a term as horrific as this one, despite the birthright citizenship case and the tariff case. It was a horrific term. What you're just telling me now, though, makes me want to scream.
Because the next term will be worse?
Well, no. No civilization, no free country in the world believes that there could ever be a legal right for private citizens to own weapons that can kill thousands of people in 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's an insane idea. We can't survive this way because whatever assault weapons are today, 10 years from now.
Why couldn't they just, this is stupid, or maybe it's not because I've never heard about it. Like, why, people always jump to, well, can you have an Apache helicopter or a nuclear missile? But why don't we just talk about like small bombs, like grenades or C4 explosive? Like what's stopping? I mean, if you can have a gun that could kill a lot of people because of the amount of bullets that it fires, the type of bullets it fires, the round, the impact and all that. What about bombs? How come we don't? Is that because
first of all, the Supreme Court has never ruled on it, but I believe the lower courts have, and certainly there are a lot of scholars who say that the Second Amendment applies to knives, for example, to make your point. It applies to knives. A knife, in my mind, a knife was never an arm.
Who says knife as a singular?
Yeah, a knife. I mean, I'm just saying it's not just guns. You're right.
I know, but you said
the logic of what the court has said about the Second Amendment would apply to a small nuclear bomb. Now, so before 2022, the answer to your question would have been, why is the federal government making it illegal for private people to own nuclear weapons? Well, the answer is obvious. If private people can own nuclear weapons, we're all much more likely to die. But if that case comes up next year, the court can't ask that question. That is not a question that is currently permissible under the Supreme Court's Bruin decision. The only question that can be asked is there a law like this that was enacted in 1791 or 1868? And that brings me to my final say about this, which I've ranted on your show so many times I can't count. For originalists to say you have to find a law today similar, if a law today is being challenged about guns, you have to find a similar law in 1791. There is no analogy between muskets and assault weapons. They are different things. They're apples and oranges. They're not the same thing.
But what about bombs?
I agree, Pete.
What about grenades? I want to start selling small bombs.
I think the court would say bombs have not traditionally been used for self-defense.
Well, yeah, but now I'm going to be selling them at my bomb store.
We are. You don't have to make that crazy hypothetical. You really don't, because assault weapons are so powerful and so dangerous.
You know what I would love?
By the way, Justice Kavanaugh today, Justice Kavanaugh, and he is one of the Supreme Court's most avid Second Amendment crazy people. Why is somebody ringing my doorbell? I'm going to ignore it. The Supreme Court today, Justice Kavanaugh wrote an opinion on an issue saying times have changed, so we can't go back to the original meaning. Yes, of course, but that's true in every case. If the court strikes down a law limiting assault weapons, then I think we can just throw it in.
What do you think about fireworks for the 4th of July? Because I hate them and I'm very against them, and I wish the court would decide against allowing people to buy them and use them recreationally.
It's a funny thing you say that, because
they're so bad for animals and people.
One of Lynn's oldest friends is coming to see us for July 4th.
Yeah.
Great people, great couple. I love them both.
They're bringing
He loves fireworks, and he will be bringing fireworks.
Unbelievable. That's the other thing. Like, people spend a lot of money on them, like thousands of dollars. I can't imagine doing that, having that kind of money. Like people who don't have that much money spend them. How do you budget for fireworks? And by the way, it's just, you just blow them all up and it's over. And you're like, man, that was $3,000. That could have been a vacation. Fuck, that's so bad that you're launching fireworks.
As a policy man,
I'd like to talk to your friend. I'd like to talk to your friend. I'd like your friend to know the consequences they have on the environment, everything from bees to dogs to veterans.
My dog, Lucy, hates.
Oh, shocking. There's no dog that likes them. You act like like Lucy's special.
He doesn't care, but Lucy cares. Lucy cares.
Monsters. All of you.
That's funny, Pete. You know, it's interesting about the July 4th and 250 years and all that.
Shut up, Kim. She's like, spend your money. I don't care. It's your money. Fine. Of course I agree with that argument. I'm just saying, like, if I talk to somebody who's on some kind of limited budget, I would scold and shame them because there's other meanwhile your kids don't have shoes or some shit, you know. Okay, that's what I meant, Kim. She's like, you know, I don't care if people spend their money on fireworks. Well, I do.
Are there fireworks where you live?
Yes, it's the worst here.
No, I don't mean town fireworks. I mean individual folks.
Yes, every house near mine fucking launches them. I try to get out of here every July 4th. It fucking sucks. And this weekend it's going to be on Saturday. I'm glad my dog is dead, so I don't have to watch her suffer.
Are they legal? You're glad your dog is dead is going to be aggregated by me right after we hang up. Pete Dominick says, I'm glad my dog is dead.
I don't want to suffer.
But New York, it's illegal in New York City, right? Gotta be.
Yeah, but they launched the hell out of them in New York City. I used to think it was like a white thing, but it is definitely like a Hispanic thing too in the city, for sure. The Dominicans, I think, love them some fireworks. Maybe it's Puerto Ricans. I don't know, but I think they shoot them at each other.
This same person came to visit us for July 4th 4 years ago.
Name this person. I want to shame them. Go ahead.
Wait, let me finish.
And they brought fireworks.
We rented a house in the North Carolina mountains. Fireworks at the time were illegal in North Carolina. So we had to drive to South Carolina to get his fireworks. He took my daughter Kai with him. She was very young. And they were gone for like 5 hours. Yeah. He literally drove 2.5 hours back and forth to get the fireworks, which I always thought was very funny.
You think it's funny? I think it's egregious. I think it's outrageous. I think he should be shamed. I bet your friend like brings fireworks for like every holiday. He's like, oh, it's the Easter fireworks show. He has risen. Boom. Jerk.
I want to end this on a serious note.
Oh.
I have a question. Can we do that? We don't have to.
Yeah. What is it going to be?
I am interested in your opinion on this.
Oh.
So, as July 4th comes, like, do you consider yourself patriotic?
No, I think it's stupid for anybody, almost anybody, anywhere, unless like Norwegian or some shit. Like,
I don't mean July 4th. I mean America. Like, do you consider?
No, I've never. No, I mean when I was little, yeah, but then
have you lost faith in our country?
I don't like to think about it as a country. I think about my community and the impact that I have been able to have with the stand-up community, my community locally. Losing faith in your country is something that I feel like it's a little bit too big and broad. And I don't know when did I have faith in this country? When I grew up, I've grown up in a country that has never had any accountability. I've grown up in a generation that never had any sacrifice. So where is the patriotism from my generation of Americans coming from? Like, what has my country done for me but make life harder? I mean, you could argue for my parents' generation there were some things, but plus I have a lot of black and brown friends, so like, come on, like those people, my friends, the people I speak to that are non-white are almost the least patriotic, and who could ever blame them? So I care about them and their interests, so it's that stuff through transfers to me. I mean, those are my feelings. I feel the way that they feel. If you treat my friend like shit, then I don't like you either.
Right. So I'm not sure, but I think that I've asked you this question once before. Like 6 years ago.
It's a weird thing too. And the way that the patriotism, like all that fucking jingoism, like the patriotic porn with the fighter jets and all that shit, like all the stuff that they did to make us patriotic, I don't think that really worked on me past like 8th grade or something. I was like, this is ridiculous. What are they doing? Well, I'm at a football game. Why is there a bomber flying over? And that's because they want you to join the military and beat a few good men, and then you fucking sign up for a war that you never should have gone to, and then when they come back, they don't take care of you. What's there to be patriotic about? Even if you're a veteran, you should be the least patriotic because your country didn't take care of you. And your countrymen didn't take care of you. Your conservative Americans act like they care so much about veterans. Bullshit. They care less than liberals do. It's preposterous. By
the way, people should watch Jon Stewart's testimony last week or this week, whenever it was, in front of Congress.
He just testified?
Yeah, I think so. About the 9/11 defenders, first responders.
Yeah, I mean, I was here. That's my city. Like what happened to those people? I know people who live in my community that are suffering with illness as a result. My daughter's friend's dad is a fireman who responded and has all kinds of issues. Lots of people.
I was just curious what your answer to that question.
I mean, you got me. What do you want? I mean, what does it even mean? Even without my opinion,
I'll tell you what it means to me.
Explore patriotism. Help me understand where it's so useful. I mean, I love people. I love my community. I love nature. I love, my school, certain organizations I belong to and, or donate or contribute to. Like there's pride to be had about all kinds of human organizations, but like a country that you didn't choose, like I didn't choose to be born, much less born here. And I got lucky being born in New York and going to good schools. And so it's just happenstance. It's all happenstance. Oh, your country's better than mine. Americans think that, and they don't even leave their country. The World Cup is hilarious to watch.
Right. So I do think that I'm a baby boomer, so I come from a different generation than you. And I'm a naturalized citizen. I chose to be a citizen because I was born in Canada. And I do think that for most of my life, there was a fairly broad consensus from very far left to very far right that America has enormous problems, especially for people of color, especially for religious minorities, especially for women, et cetera. And still, compared to other parts of the world, because every country has its flaws and everything, we hold up pretty well. And I would respond in my more radical moments, but we had more advantages than other countries because we have oceans dividing us and all that stuff. But I think that's changed. I think now a lot of people feel the way you just articulated.
Yeah, but I just think...
Wait, let me finish.
Yeah. Even that, though, is you're talking about men. Like, do women and people of color, did they ever feel that way when they didn't have the same rights that men did? And you could look at any other country, many other countries that did?
I don't know. But what I do know is healthcare and guns. Those two things are what I think almost objectively, certainly empirically, show that we are terribly lacking compared to the Western world.
And racism and sexism and our imperial nature and our invasions into other countries and our lack of accountability for something like the financial collapse. Like, I understand why people your age and older have a certain sense that certainly white folks, white men, and we were conditioned that way. But I don't understand why any young person would be like, oh, I'm proud to be an American. This idea, somebody's writing in the chat, my friends are talking about, like, I like the idea of what this country could be. Sure, a pluralistic society where people from all over the world come to this place and you can succeed. But Canada's that way, and plenty of places in Europe are that way, and other countries have that now. And so it's like, that's the aspiration, that we can live together with people who are different. It's in 2026, you can fly anywhere the fuck you want.
I don't know, but I'm guessing in 1978 or something, I don't know if people were dying from lack of health care in this country. Maybe they were, but I'm not sure.
Poor people were.
Very poor people were, yeah. But I do think health care and guns are what make us uniquely terrible.
Well, yeah, I think those two, but I think if you ask people from other countries, they almost always talk about capital punishment and war.
That too, sure. But again, like you were talking about the trans cases. They're very important. They don't affect everybody. Capital punishment is a terrible thing in my view, but it doesn't affect everybody. Healthcare and guns affects everybody. Yeah. Everybody. Everybody is touched by healthcare and guns. We are just so far away from the rest of the world on both of those issues.
I think the other measurement that is sadly a newer one, though, is when you look at some of the other countries in the world that are run by, that are theocracies or very, very religious, especially Arab countries in the world. Right. I'm thinking of some African countries as well. You look at that and go, well, I wouldn't want to live there, right? Women can't drive. They got to wear a burqa in Afghanistan or something like that. Right. But Pakistan elected a woman before we did, Benazir Bhutto. More importantly,
I think we're like one of the last free countries in the world.
More importantly, outside of like the specific gender leadership, equation, America now is run by Christian fundamentalists, Christian nationalists. So we do compare to those other religious fundamental countries. That is not how we grew up. We saw that grow. You covered and documented it well throughout our lifetime. We saw the power of extreme religious fundamentalists grow. And now they have all of the power, every branch of government, and most importantly, all these Supreme Court decisions that come out because Christian nationalists, and I think the rest of the world sees that now and goes, holy shit, it's turning into a Margaret Atwood novel.
Yep, I agree with all of that. And by the way, just to clear up something we've talked about for years, the merging of the Republican Party with Jerry Falwell Sr. and Pat Robertson and the evangelical right in the 70s, it happened over abortion. But everyone knows that. But that's not how it started. And I've done a lot of research on this recently, and it's still different than I've said before on your show. It really started when there was white flight in the 1960s when public schools had to be desegregated. So a lot of private schools opened, including religious schools.
Right.
For a while, those religious schools got tax exemptions. In the early 70s, it was decided that if you openly discriminate against black people and you're a private school, you can do that because the Constitution doesn't apply to private schools. But the government can't fund that with tax exemptions and tax breaks. That is when Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell and that entire movement started thinking we need to rally the troops.
So race. So first race, then gender. So first black folks, anti-black, then anti women's reproductive rights.
Now they lost on the race. They lost the private school issue on
but it animated them and organized them. Into becoming, this and using that religious cover as a way.
Born in racism, but thrived on sexism.
Well, that's a lot of what this country has been. What about that voting case? That was a pretty big development that yesterday the mail-in voting, they're going to allow mail-in.
Well, it's a big development. I mean, it's a good thing they can count mail-in ballots. This is not a constitutional question. It's up to Congress. And the Supreme Court interpreted
it should be up to each state how they run their system, right?
No. Well, each state can run its system subject to Congress's direction. Congress doesn't do much. Congress has a couple rules, one of which is very serious, has to be single-member winner-take-all districts. That's a big rule. People more sophisticated than I am in the political world will tell you that's a cause of a lot of our problems. But leaving that aside, and it says you have to count the votes on Election Day. And the Supreme Court reasonably interpreted, there's an election day. And the Supreme Court said, well, if you mail in your ballot and it's postmarked by Election Day, that's good enough. It can't be postmarked after Election Day. But if it's postmarked Election Day or before, that counts. And if it takes you 5 days to count it takes 5 days to count it. Congress could change that tomorrow. So that decision was just reading what Congress said. It was obviously a correct decision. But it's also unclear which political party that helped. The reason the court issued that decision, Pete,
is because they thought it helped Republicans more. Yeah. Potentially.
No.
It would have hurt them if they decided against. Yeah.
I think so. Yes. So that's what's going on there. The campaign finance case today is 100 times more important. And just one last thing about the case today. It's one more step to what the Roberts Court eventually is going to do, which is going to say you can't even limit direct donations.
But by the way, I don't like it when people do a false equivalency about the Democratic Party when it comes to campaign finance, money in politics, the conversation. You and I both know that Democrats, especially in the Senate, did everything they could to overturn Citizens United. They tried to pass the Disclose Act that would go halfway or at least create disclosure. Republicans, by the way, don't like raising money either. Nobody likes going and asking people for money. The Republicans, if you talk to them that are running for Congress or Senate, any office, they don't like calling people up and asking for. Nobody likes that. They would love a system that had created some kind of an equal playing field, much like the rest of the world potentially. But the bottom line is Democrats have always ideologically and policy-wise tried to reform our campaign finance issues and still want that. The idea that they're somehow getting rich or that they are getting all these money donors, it's not true. I mean, Democrats on every single campaign platform always say overturn Citizens United, and they try to do it. They passed the House vote out of the House when Obama was president. It just didn't get out of the Senate.
So for the record, and now that I'm the executive director of a center devoted to democracy, I have been doing a lot more studying of this than I ever did to teach it and write about it. Pete, for the record, Citizens United should not be overruled.
Overturned?
Overturned. The reasoning of Citizens United is terrible and needs to be overturned. The result in Citizens United was 100% correct. It was a prior restraint on political speech by a nonprofit company. In other words, a nonprofit company created a movie, could have been a book. The law would apply to movies and books that said Hillary Clinton is evil and terrible and don't vote for her. And they wanted to release this within 60 days of an election. Saying they can't do that you can't issue a book or a movie about political speech is a violation of the First Amendment. But what the court should have done in that case is said this opinion only applies to nonprofit organizations or ideological who are engaging in this kind of speech. That's a whole different question than can that same company give money to a candidate, or can that company spend money directly in consultation with a candidate? And what do we do with for-profit companies, which is a very different conversation. But the court lumped it all in one thing and said money is speech. Corporations have the same rights as people, and both of those things need to be overturned.
Right. Well, I appreciate you splitting the hair and explaining that, but you didn't answer my point. It is still It
is the liberals and progressives who are fighting for campaign finance reform in this country, and that has been true for 40 or 50 years. Yep. Yes, you're right. Okay. And it's the liberal and progressive justices who have been fighting to do the right thing in constitutional law. Just one last footnote on this, Pete. I mean, everything that the Supreme Court has done about campaign finance, which is a dozen cases telling state and federal legislatures what they can and cannot do, none of it can be justified by the history of the First Amendment. It's just justices imposing their values. You know, they want a free market for politics, and that was never our country. There were laws in 1910, 1915 dealing with this. If America survives 50 years from now, the Roberts Court's campaign finance decisions will be viewed like Dred Scott. They will. They'll be in shame. But it's going to take 50 years, 70 years for that to happen.
Well, I can't wait till we see that together.
Yeah. You may be alive, but I'll be long gone.
Oh, don't say that, Segall. Thank you very much for your time. As always, go support Eric on Blue Sky. Follow him there. Visit him.
Watch Serena. It's fun.
Go watch Serena. That'll be some joy. That'll be fun. And thank you all for watching live, and I will talk to you later. All right. That's not it. That's not it. You can stay because there's more with Segall from our conversation last week about a very important decision on guns. Yesterday, by the way, well, you heard me mention it in that conversation, there might be more gun cases being decided next term, but we didn't have that news yet. Let's do last week's conversation with Eric Segall now as well. All right. Yeah. Hello and welcome to The Legal Eagle with Eric Segall, and we've got a lot to talk about because the Supreme Court has made some rulings. It is June. It's almost all over. And so from Georgia State University and Dorf on Law, where you've been posting for a long time, it's Eric Segall. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Pete. We're not almost done, frankly. We've got a bunch more to go, but there were important cases decided today.
The Supreme Court handed down a wave of major decisions siding with Trump on ending temporary protections for Haitians and Syrians. It backed Trump's asylum restrictions. It struck down Hawaii's gun limits, and it sided with Monsanto/Bayer in a major Roundup case. And so obviously the court continues to reshape America and affect us in so many ways that you've been teaching us for years. Which of any of these cases are you most following, folks?
The gun case. The gun case is the big one today. There are big cases coming. There were several. The immigration cases today and the asylum cases are super important, super terrible. But Pete, I've known you a long time. You know I don't talk about things I'm not an expert on. In my capacity as a constitutional law professor and scholar, and the immigration and asylum cases are not in my wheelhouse. And I know enough to know they're bad, but it's the gun case I really want to focus on. But can I make a couple preliminary comments?
Of course. Yeah, go ahead.
So first, there's been a lot of media reports, and one specific law professor, Jonathan Adler, has been for years putting forth this narrative that the court isn't really a 6-3 court, or back in the day, it wasn't really a 5-4 court when it was 5-4. He's wrong. They're wrong. Everybody's wrong about this. 6 of the last 7 cases, I believe, this week were 6-3 cases decided along partisan lines. I apologize to your audience for my scratchy throat. I've been doing a lot of talking. This is a 6-3 court on most important cases. It was a 5 court on most important cases, 15 years before that. We should recognize that this is a Republican-Democrat split on most important cases that Americans care about. Do not believe what you read in the media about the court deciding a lot of cases unanimously. Yes, they do. We don't really care about those. Sometimes one of the conservatives or liberals will flip, but it's very rare. This is a partisan court deciding cases in a partisan manner. And I want your audience to ignore those people who are saying it's more complicated than that. It's really not. And here's the proof. The court only takes about 75 cases a year now, maybe 70 to 75. Of those, only about 8 to 12 are constitutional law, front page New York Times cases. Those are almost all 6-3. They used to be almost all 5-4. If the court actually decided 70 constitutional law cases a term, which it could do, it decides its own cases, 90% of those would be 5-4 or 6-3 in this world. They don't do that for a lot of reasons, one of which is the game would be over if they did that. If we had 57 6-3 opinions out of 70 opinions, the partisan nature of the court would be obvious. So they try to hide that by deciding a lot of cases that, frankly, they don't have to decide. So I just want to clear the underbrush. I also want to say that next week we're going to hear about the birthright citizenship case, which most of us think will come out the correct way, but you never know. A couple really important transgender cases that you and I have talked about in the past, and super important cases involving the president's ability to fire the heads of independent agencies. That's all coming next week. And those cases could in some ways transform America. But today we're going to return to the Second Amendment and an impossibly dumb and stupid case that the Supreme Court decided today.
Yes. This case comes out of Hawaii. Supreme Court on Thursday, this is SCOTUS blog, struck down a Hawaii law that makes it a crime for gun owners to bring their guns onto private property that is open to the public unless they have the property owner's specific consent. It's titled Wolford v. Lopez. 6-3, justices agreed with a group of residents, Hawaii residents, Maui residents, with concealed carry permits that the law violates the Second Amendment's guarantee of the right to bear arms. Thursday's decision will have an impact not only in Hawaii, but also in 4 other states, California, Maryland, New York, and New Jersey, that have similar laws.
So let me give a little bit of background, but I'm also going to do something I almost never do on your show. Mike Dorf on Law already has a post on the case today, and his is a kind of he takes on a couple of the issues in the case that are really important. Tomorrow morning on Dorf on Law will be my summary of what's going on in this case. So here's the background. Hawaii has, for most of its history, had some of the most stringent gun laws in the country. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense, right? A place whose economy is focused on tourism doesn't want gun tragedies and gun accidents and gun violence to scare tourists away. This is not a hard thing to figure out. Until 2008, Hawaii was free to pass almost any gun law it wanted to pass. Right. Then, because from 1791 to 2008, the Supreme Court interpreted the Second Amendment for what it says: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And everyone thought it applied only to militia service. And it was kind of an obsolete constitutional provision. And by the way, in terms of state laws, we don't even need it because 41 states have state constitutional provisions that protect the right to own guns. And you could always bring these cases under state law if you wanted to. And there are very few federal laws about guns. But in 2008, of course, everything changed. And Justice Scalia, for a 5-4 court in District of Columbia versus Heller, for the first time in American history, wrote that the Second Amendment protects an individual right to own guns. That Heller decision, though, I'm sorry for the noise. Can you hear it?
Nobody cares.
Okay. Yeah. It always happens when I'm talking to you. Heller invalidated a District of Columbia law that prohibited all handguns, with only minor exceptions for police officers, some other people. And it didn't really change that much in 2008. Changed things a little bit, but not all that much. In 2010, in the McDonald case, the Supreme Court applied Heller to state laws because District of Columbia is not a state. So it didn't technically apply to California, New York, and Hawaii. Okay. They then apply it to state laws. And for 10 years, nothing happened. And almost every gun law that was challenged in state and local courts and federal courts were upheld. And the reason the Supreme Court never returned to the Second Amendment for almost a decade was because no one knew how Justice Kennedy, at the time, the swing vote, was going to decide the case.
Right.
We now know, after Kennedy's retirement, there's a paragraph in Heller that says nothing in this opinion suggests that traditional laws regulating guns in the hands of felons, the mentally ill, in sensitive places, nothing in this decision affects those laws. We now know that paragraph, Scalia didn't want to put that paragraph in, and he was criticized by conservatives for putting that paragraph in. We now know he had to, because Justice Kennedy would not have provided the fifth vote without that paragraph. So the Supreme Court says in 2008, nothing in this opinion suggests that traditional laws regulating guns for dangerous people in sensitive places are unconstitutional.
Right.
And that's where we stood until the whole Justice Barrett at the last minute in 2020 and Mitch McConnell not letting Obama pick another judge in 2016 when Scalia died. That's where we stood until we got Kavanaugh, Barrett, and Gorsuch. And then we got New York State Pistol and Rifle Association from your hometown against Bruen. And Bruen is the problem. So people think Heller is the problem. Heller is wrong and terrible, but it's not the problem. Bruen is the problem. Justice Thomas, for one of the first times in his long career, writing the majority opinion in a major constitutional case, which he had done maybe twice in 28 years before that, writes an incoherent, insane, I've called it insane in many of my writings, crazy opinion that said we're going to change how we adjudge the constitutionality of gun laws. It used to be you ask why the state passed this law, what's the reason for it,
right,
and how much of a burden is it on gun owners. That's how we do constitutional law. In free speech cases, a law infringes free speech in some ways. How much of a burden is it? And what is the reason for it? The reason you can't yell fire in a crowded theater if there's no fire is because the harm of allowing that is greater than the infringement on the right to free speech. Thomas changed all of that and said we're no longer going to apply in Second Amendment cases this balancing test. Why is the government doing this? How much of a burden is on the right? Instead, it's a two-part test. Does the law affect guns at all? Which is stupid. Of course, all of these laws being challenged affects guns.
Right.
If you meet the first part of the test, which you always do, then the question is only, can the government point to a similar law or laws ratified either in 1791 when the Second Amendment was adopted or 1868 when, this is kind of complicated, when the 14th Amendment made the Second Amendment applicable to the states? Because originally in 1791, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, none of those applied to the states, only to the federal government. It is only after the 14th Amendment was passed that these laws now apply equally to the states.
Is this why you posted guns and speech are not the same, guns and speech are not the same over and over?
Well, that's a different reason. We'll get to that in a second. All right. Hawaii's laws on guns survived for 10 years after Heller and after McDonald. But after Bruen, they knew they were in trouble. So they had to pass a different set of laws. And one of those laws I'm now going to describe is the issue in this case, was the law in this case. So everybody agrees, from Thomas and Alito to Jackson and Kagan to Segall to the NRA even, everybody agrees that as the owner of a private commercial establishment, a restaurant, a theater, a hotel, a shopping mall, the owners of private non-government establishments have the right to say no guns on my property. And no one's debating that. That's still the law today. If you own a small mom and pop butcher store and you put up a sign, no guns allowed, that is constitutionally protected.
Butcher store?
Whatever. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I'm riled up. What can I say?
All they do is just meat. He's just a butcher. But he doesn't want any guns in there because whatever. He's a butcher.
If I owned a small store in an urban area, I would not want guns in my store.
Yeah, especially if it was like a hat shop or a butcher shop. Store.
I've had a long week, Pete Dominick audience.
I mean, any store, it's my store. I don't want you to bring guns in. I mean, I've watched movies where they used to walk in a saloon and they used to take their guns from them, and made sense. It's a sensible policy.
And that hasn't changed, Pete. So I don't want to mislead your audience. That has not changed. What Hawaii decided, though, was instead of making that kind of implicit and kind of, the rule, we're going to have a different rule. In Hawaii and New York, California, and one other state, as you mentioned, now the rule is you don't have a right to bring a gun in a privately owned commercial establishment unless you get express permission, right? The default rule is you can't. The default rule used to be you can bring it on unless the property owner says no. Hawaii changed that and said now the default rule is you can't bring it on private property unless the property owner says yes. Now remember, property owners can always say no guns. So all Hawaii is doing in that situation is reflecting the wishes of the majority of its people through its local legislature that we want people to bring guns on private property only if they get express permission. This is so obviously sensible and so obviously right that that it just should be upheld. But the judges deciding Second Amendment cases, including the Supreme Court, no longer are allowed to say to the state, why did you pass this law and how much of a burden is it? Because if they'd asked that question, it would be easy. The people of Hawaii don't want guns on their private property, and those who do can still have guns on their private property. And we think it's a safer, better, more protected state if we flip the presumption. It's totally rational. And you can still bring guns on private property if the owner allows. Can't ask that question. Instead, you have to ask, are there similar laws in 1791 or 1868? And that's the only question you're allowed to ask. So my blog post and the court ruled there were no similar laws. Justices Jackson, Kagan, and Sotomayor thought there were similar laws. But that question is unconscionably stupid. We could spend the next hour and 45 minutes explaining why that's stupid, but here are some reasons. First, there is no technology, there's no weapon in 1791 remotely, or 1868, remotely close to either assault weapons today or actually, more importantly, small handguns you can hide in your pocket,
right,
but take out and do a lot of freaking damage. So what does it mean to say, was there an analogous law? They didn't have this problem. Nobody in 1791 was worried about having a small gun in your pocket that you could hide and take out and shoot 10 people. That wasn't a thing. Same is true mostly in 1868. So the question itself is nonsensical. Here's the analogy, Pete. Federal government requires seatbelts in cars. If a gun manufacturer, challenged that, the court would analyze that by saying, what's the reason for the law? How much of a burden on a right is it? To say if
a car manufacturer challenged it.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Thank you. But to say, can you find a similar law in 1791 would be insane, because the only method of ground transportation in 1791 were horses and I guess bikes, but that's it. Eventually trains, later.
Yeah. You used to have one of those bikes with the big wheel in the front and the little wheel in the middle when you were little. But more importantly, that's not a right given in the Constitution. Transportation, why are you using that analogy? Because somebody might argue, well, guns, the Second Amendment.
Well, no, wait a minute. First of all, when either a state or federal government tells me that I must wear a seatbelt, or I'll get a traffic ticket, whether I want to or not, that is an infringement on my liberty. And if I brought that case, the court would say, what is the reason the state is making you wear a seatbelt? Now, in that situation, the standard would be, is there a rational basis for the law? But I would still have the right. I have the right, Pete, not to wear a seatbelt. But it is overcome by the policy reasons for the state making me wear a seatbelt. That's how we would answer that question. If you want to go to free speech, we can. There was a case a few years ago, where Texas prohibited, made it very difficult for children under 16, I think it was, to access adult sites. which also made it much more difficult for adults to access adult sites because you had to do certain things that 16-year-olds couldn't do, but adults could. Well, the court asked the question, how much of a burden is this on adults? Well, it's a little bit of a burden, but it's not so much that the state doesn't have a reason for doing it. That's how the state is doing this to protect minors.
Right.
So that's the reason. Now, if the state said adults can't, write an op-ed without going through various procedural governmental hurdles as a prior restraint, there'd be no policy reason that could justify it. It's just how we think about all constitutional law. Someone comes to court and says, I have a right to do something. The judge says, okay, how important is this right? Let's talk about that. Then they decide, okay, what's the reason why the state is infringing that right? Then you balance the two and make a decision. In the Second Amendment and the Second Amendment alone, you can't do that. The only question is there an historical analog? And Pete, everyone knows why Justice Thomas made that move in that case. Everyone knows this in the court. Because if you ask the question, what is the policy behind gun laws? And the answer is almost always public safety. Then most of those gun laws are going to fail. I'm sorry, are going to pass muster because the safety rationale is going to appeal to judges much more than the reasons why gun rights are important. That's why for most of our history, gun laws were allowed and they were never struck down by judges. They weren't always passed, but they were usually upheld. They knew that, so they took the balancing out of it. So to ask whether there's an analogous law to a 2026 gun law when the guns in 1791 and 1868 were completely different makes no sense. And by the way, no other country in the world decides legal issues that way. They just don't. There are so many things. First of all, Times Square, as it currently exists in New York City, for example, there was no urban area 1/50th as dense as Times Square in 1791.
Right. Meaning you could get a lot of people and have a gun that killing a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a problem that didn't exist. Now, this is a critique of originalism, but in most cases, the Supreme Court has not, in all cases, really, maybe one or two other exceptions that are small, the court doesn't say history only. The court says history is our guide. History should be relevant. It shouldn't be a guide. But when we're talking about it as history only, think of the frustration of states. We pass a gun law. We think it's really important. It gets challenged. States are not allowed to explain the importance of the law. It's irrelevant as a legal matter. That's insane. And no other court in the world does it that way. It's just crazy. That's one reason. Second reason, judges and lawyers aren't historians. Even if we could make reasonable analogies, which we can't, but even if we could, or not you and me, or judges or lawyers, but historians, they have a hard time with it. But so lower court judges have been complaining loudly since Bruin was decided 4 years ago, that we can't do this. We're not historians. It's an impossible question. Is this law similar to another law? I don't know. I'm not a historian, right? So that's the second problem. Third problem, even after Bruin and two other cases, including the one today, the Supreme Court has not told us whether the relevant time period is 1791, when the Second Amendment did not apply to the states, or 1868, when theoretically it did, or both. So even if you ask the historical question, we still don't know what's the right time period. And in all three cases, the court has said, we're not going to tell you yet. We haven't decided yet. That's insane. But mostly, Pete, it is not the job of judges to go on a wild goose chase through centuries of history to figure out whether a law passed in 1791 is similar. We don't know. What if you find 5 similar laws out of 13 colonies or 13 states? Is that enough? We don't know. In the Bruin case itself, the New York law was from 1911, based on even earlier laws than that. And using tradition and history, the court said, and they still struck him down. That's a century old. I mean, so we don't even know how to balance these things or how to weigh. So today, the majority and the dissents disagree over whether the laws were analogous or not. Oh, there were some laws actually that were similar. but the majority called them outliers. Well, how many laws do there have to be before they're outliers? So my monologue ends here. What the Bruin test really does is violates the rule of law. Because what is going to happen, and what has happened in all of these cases, is that judges will, in their own heads, say to themselves, how much of a burden on the right is this law being? And second, what are the benefits to society that the law provides? What are the public interest benefits? But they can't write any of that down. So then they'll find historical evidence to support whichever way they go, which means judges aren't giving us the real reasons for their decisions. And a key part of the rule of law is when courts do this kind of things, they're supposed to be honest about why, so we can judge it, right? And they can't do that anymore. So, of course, liberal judges find analogies all the time, and conservative judges don't. But what they're really disagreeing, it's not happening today, but what they're really disagreeing about, Pete, is not history. It's about the balance between gun rights and public safety. I want to make one more point for if there are any new people who are listening to this who don't know me or haven't heard me in the past. I'm willing to say that reasonable people can disagree over whether the Constitution as a whole protects gun rights. The Second Amendment does not. The Second Amendment clearly does not protect gun rights separate from militia service, and Heller's just wrong. But the Supreme Court has consistently found fundamental constitutional rights that are not in the text of the Constitution. For example, you and I have the right to refuse medical treatment. If we're a competent adult, we have the right to refuse medical, even if it kills us. That's not in the Constitution, but the Supreme Court used the Ninth Amendment and the 14th Amendment to say it's a fundamental right. You and I have the right to bring up our children the way we see fit, as long as we're competent. We're legally competent. That right is not in the Constitution, Pete, but we have that right. Americans love their guns. They've always loved their guns. So very smart liberal law professors like Akhil Amar at Yale and Sandy Levinson at Texas, who are very progressive liberal law professors, have suggested that if we're going to have rights not in the text of the Constitution, well, gun rights is a candidate. And it is. I have to be honest. It is. But even if there are gun rights in the Constitution, we still have to balance how much the right is being infringed against the reason for the infringement. It's how constitutional law was always done. And now we can't do that in Second Amendment cases, and that's insane. And the footnote is, really, Justice Thomas really was not a justice who was given the opportunity to write majority opinions and keep the 5 or 6 votes intact until the Bruin case. He'd written like 2 in his entire career. And it's an incompetent decision. The court did back off of it a little bit in the last gun case.
They did?
From 2020. In 2024, and you and I talked about that.
Oh, yes, baby. Yeah, no.
The domestic violence person who had his gun taken away, the court did uphold that. The reason the court upheld that, it would tell you, is that it found analogs. That's not the reason. The court did that in 2024 for 2 reasons. The election was coming, and they didn't want to see a headline, Supreme Court affirms the right of domestic violence, men to carry guns. Right. They didn't want to, that'd be a terrible headline in 2024. But second, implicitly, all of the justices really, except Thomas, maybe Alito, I forget. But Thomas, I think Thomas was the only dissenter. I'd have to go back and look. But all of them made the implicit judgment, no, people who beat their wives shouldn't have guns. Right. It's not that hard. But they didn't phrase it that way. They said, well, in 1791, there were similar laws, even though there weren't. So it's a mess, Pete. It is terrible, and it is incoherent, and it needs to be changed, and hopefully someday will.
Did you hear
for that long monologue?
No, it was quite a deep lesson. I learned a lot, as always. Did you hear about this issue between Alito and Sotomayor?
Which one?
Joan Biskupic.
A very good CNN. Used to be CNN. Now she's somewhere else. But yeah,
she was on CNN. She said she's reporting an intense scene when Justice Samuel Alito fumed at Justice Sonia Sotomayor over a blistering dissent that, quote, blindsided him as several decisions involving Trump's immigration agenda were read out. You didn't hear about
so those two cases, I'm sorry, I did hear about. I thought are we moving on from the gun case?
Well, I mean,
we can.
Jesus Christ.
It's one more sentence about it. States should have the right to allow its property owners to say, we don't want guns on our property unless we give you express permission. It's not that hard.
Especially butchers.
Okay. So there were two cases today involving Trump's immigration and asylum policies. Pete, immigration law and asylum law is so complicated. It's not really constitutional law. It's more interpreting federal statutes, and I'm not an expert in that. At the Supreme Court, the justice who writes the majority opinion often reads a part of that opinion when it comes, not always, but often reads, and sometimes it's 2 sentences, sometimes it's 20 minutes, it depends. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a dissenting justice will read their dissent. That used to be, or parts of their dissent. That used to be very, very rare. It is now very, very common because the Roberts Court has gone off the deep end on so many issues. So Sotomayor and Jackson, not Kagan, but Sotomayor and Jackson, they seem to be on the edge of nervous breakdowns. I mean, they're so frustrated.
Really?
They're so angry. Yeah, they are so, and you can't blame them. I mean, the Roberts Court has changed constitutional law in the last 5 years in unbelievably dramatic ways. Right. Abortion was a right, now it's not. Affirmative action was allowed, now it's not. Congress could stop the president from firing the heads of agencies without good cause, now they can't. All of Second Amendment law has changed since 2022, all of it, in the way I just explained. So, and I go on and on and on. Or this voting rights, probably the biggest changes of all, just terrible. And Justice Jackson is really upset about that. So they're reading their dissents from the bench on a greater frequency. And now, by the way, we should be watching this, but there are no cameras in the court.
Right.
Now, we do get to hear oral arguments, which is a good change. But these opinion announcements, which, by the way, the justices themselves have complete control over, are never broadcast live. Now, we can hear them like months from now at some point, but never live. That's a real problem. That's a rule of law problem as well. From what I can piece together from reports today, Sotomayor and Jackson maybe were especially angry and upset. So you might remember it was Justice Alito who in 2002, whenever it was, when Citizens United came out, the first State of the Union address after Citizens United, Obama was talking about how bad the decision was, said something about it, and Alito mouthed the words, not true.
Right.
And the whole world saw it. Very disrespectful. Alito has no, look, Pete, he's a small little dick of a man.
Oh, wow.
He was a dick in college when he was fighting against allowing women into clubs at Princeton, maybe even to Princeton at all. I don't remember. He's been fighting against racial and gender and LGBT equality his entire life, not just as a judge, but as a college student, a law student. His entire life, he's been fighting against these things. He's the guy who put the, MAGA flag, his wife, or he put the MAGA flag on his house. He also receives all kinds of gifts from the billionaires that Justice Thomas gets gifts from. But mostly, he's just a puny little man. And I would encourage your listeners, if they're interested in why I'm being very personal about Justice Alito. So Mike Dorf, who I blog with, who was Justice Kennedy's law clerk in the most important term of the court from like 1992 when the court affirmed Roe versus Wade. Mike Dorf's wife was a law professor and tragically passed away a few years ago. Yeah. Brilliant person. For the last 6 months of her life, and she knew it was the last 6 months of her life, she wrote a series of blog posts about Justice Alito. Not Thomas, not Scalia, not Alito. All the evidence you need for Scalia's smallness as a human being, not as a judge, as a human being, you can find in those blog posts.
Alito's smallness of a human being. Yeah. You said Scalia.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I said not Scalia, not Thomas. I mean, she really had it out for Alito and for good reason. It was also Alito who cited Matthew Hale in the Dobbs opinion, overturning Roe, a man who had lived in the 17th century and thought husbands could rape their wives and so on. And you could have overturned Roe versus Wade very easily without mentioning 17th century men who thought women were the property of their husbands.
4 years since Dobbs. Since Roe.
I know. Yesterday, right? Yesterday was the 4-year anniversary. Yeah. By the way, for another long-standing conversation you and I have had, and actually we once had it with Mike Dorf, who does not agree with me on this, but he's wrong. Without Roe versus Wade, there wouldn't be Heller or McDonald or the Bruin case.
If you say so.
Heller was simply Justice Scalia's and the conservative and Alito's and Thomas's revenge for Roe versus Wade. Yeah. That's what it was.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Class is in session, Will Powers wrote on the chat. I appreciate everything that you offer us. It's great to be in your classroom. I always love learning from you. These are great conversations, and I can't thank you enough. We'll be talking again, unfortunately, in the next couple of weeks because there'll be more decisions. What, next week? Next Monday and Thursday?
Next Monday. Can I apologize to your audience for the I'm not usually this much of a ranter and I rant a lot. I don't engage in monologues this long. But the Second Amendment is really it's a nightmare beyond nightmares in terms of constitutional law and constitutional interpretation.
Yeah, the consequences.
I thought the background was really necessary.
It was really helpful for anybody who wants to take a deeper dive, especially, and learn how much nuance and detail there is to it and how there's so much more to learn and be reminded of. Many things that we've learned from before, but it's hard to keep track. But you do it for us. Thank you very much for all of it, my friend.
My pleasure. I'm sure I'll talk to you next week, and hopefully we'll put the birthright citizenship stuff.
Yeah. That should come out next week, or
it will come out.
Okay.
Unless they hold it over for a term, which they occasionally do. With Big Brown was held over, Citizens United was held over, so it could be held over. But I suspect we'll hear. It's not a hard. So Pete, one quick goodbye to your audience. Before the Trump immunity case came out, that gave presidents, almost total immunity from criminal prosecution. Before that case, I would have said to you, I'm 99.9% sure the court will even these justices will do the right thing on birthright citizenship. But once that case came down the way it did, which nobody predicted, I can only be about 75% sure of anything.
Right.
But hopefully we'll be celebrating the continued existence of birthright citizenship.
Well, I won't. I'm against it. I've been on the record for a long time. I will be.
Well, and that's, by the way, there are policy reasons to be against it, but you have to amend the Constitution to change it in the real world. It's very clear.
It's too bad Mamdani can't run for president. He wasn't born here.
Yes, and that also you'd have to change the It's as clear that he can't run here as birthright citizenship.
Right.
They're equally clear.
All right. Well, that's the end of the conversation. That's where I ended it for you. And that's the end of today's podcast. Did you listen to 2 hours of Segall mostly? Either way, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. And thank you for having a paid subscription. If you do, if you don't, sign up now, patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Write a rating and review over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and subscribe on YouTube and Substack, where I'm often going live with these guests. And I will be doing that tonight with David Rothkopf. If you listen all the way to the end, you found out about me and Rothkopf today at 5 p.m. That is all I've got for you. I will talk to you tomorrow. Thank you for being here today. I love you. Be the change you want to see in the world. Bye-bye.
When the tyrants taunt you and the sirens teach you, better stand up. Stand up. Let the brave meet the challenge. Let the weak flee. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. We got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand